What if this life isn't your first? It's one of those huge questions, right? Well, today, we're going to dive deep into that idea of reincarnation. We're going to explore the arguments and evidence, all based on our source material, that suggest our existence might be a journey that stretches way beyond just this one lifetime. So let's just start right there. Let's get personal for a second. Really think about it. What if the life you're living right now, with all its ups and downs, its wins and losses, is just one single chapter in a much, much longer story? You see, the core idea from our source is that our true identity, the very essence of who you are, isn't actually tied to the body you have right now. Instead, it's a soul, a spark of consciousness that's on this incredible journey, traveling from one life to the next. And this idea, well, it's not new. It brings us to the heart of our explainer today, a question that has fascinated thinkers and philosophers for thousands of years. Okay, so just to make sure we're all on the same page, let's get a clear definition. When we say reincarnation, we're talking about this specific belief, that after we die, our soul doesn't just end. It's actually reborn into a new body to live a whole new life. It's a continuous cycle of death and rebirth. It's a really fascinating concept, for sure, but it immediately brings up a huge question, doesn't it? For people who believe this, is there any kind of proof? Well, our source material actually points to a few areas of research that proponents say offer some pretty compelling clues. And that leads us straight to the work of a psychiatrist named Dr. Ian Stevenson. This guy spent decades researching cases of thousands, literally thousands of children who claimed they could remember past lives. So Dr. Stevenson's main theory is pretty wild. He suggested that some of our most intense, seemingly irrational fears, our phobias, might not be random at all. He thought they could be echoes, like leftover trauma from a past life, specifically tied to how that life ended. So here's how that connection would work. According to his research, if someone drowned in a past life, they might have this unexplainable, intense fear of water in this life. Or if someone died from being stabbed, they might have a phobia of knives. The basic idea is that the trauma gets carried over by the soul from one body to the next. But that's not all. The source material also brings up another really interesting area of study, the case of identical twins. Now, we all know that identical twins come from a single egg, right? They have the exact same genetic blueprint. And yet, anyone who knows identical twins can tell you they often have completely different personalities. So the explanation offered here is that while their bodies are genetically the same, they're inhabited by two totally different souls, each with its own unique history. Okay, so if we follow this train of thought for a minute, the next logical question is, how does it all work? What are the rules of the game? If a soul gets reborn, what decides where it goes and what kind of life it's going to have? This is where we get into the mechanics of it all. Our source dives into the concepts of karma and, really importantly, the state of your mind at the exact moment of death. Our source material points to this specific verse from the Bhagavad Gita, an ancient Hindu scripture. And the idea here is that your consciousness, your very last thoughts and feelings as you leave your body, acts like a powerful magnet, pulling your soul toward a future that perfectly matches that final state of being. So it really boils down to two key things that determine your next life. First, like we just saw, it's what's on your mind at the moment of death. And second, it's your karma, basically a cosmic balance sheet of all your actions. The sum total of all the good and bad you've done creates a kind of trajectory for your soul. All right, so how does this whole system of action and reaction actually play out in the real world? This next section explores what the outcomes can look like. Okay, now I want to be super clear here. The examples on this next slide are taken directly from our source material. They're there to illustrate how this principle of karmic reaction is thought to work, often by creating these paired, opposite situations from one life to another. So the source gives these specific pairings as examples of what it calls karmic duality. The idea being presented is that a soul experiences the full spectrum of life. So someone who is rich in one life might be born poor in the next. Someone educated might come back as illiterate. The text even extends this to social, national, and religious identities, suggesting that the ultimate goal is for the soul to experience life from every possible angle, to gain a complete understanding of existence. And really, the biggest takeaway here is this incredible sense of personal responsibility.
This whole theory suggests that the life we have right now is the direct result of our past actions. But even more importantly, our actions today are actively drawing the blueprint for our life to come.
And we're not just talking about big dramatic actions. Our source shows how it works in our everyday choices. Let's say you're dealing with a difficult person. Do you choose that negative path and think, well, I should just be harsh and selfish too? Or do you choose the positive path of kindness and patience? According to this view, every single one of those small choices is building your future karma. So, to wrap it all up, the picture our source material paints is of this grand, continuous journey. It's a cycle where every single action has a consequence, and every single life is a new opportunity for the soul to learn, to grow, and to literally shape its own destiny through the choices it makes. And that leaves us with one final thought. Whether you believe in this framework or not, it makes you think. It poses this powerful question for all of us. If you knew, for sure, that you had another life coming, what would you change about how you're living this one? So who are you? I mean, really? Is the person you see in the mirror the whole story? Or are you just looking at a single chapter? Today, we're going to dive into a pretty fascinating source that tackles one of humanity's oldest questions. What is it that makes us us? We'll be exploring the ideas of the soul and reincarnation. So let's get into it. Let's just start with the big one, the question that's at the absolute heart of everything we're talking about today. What if this life, this body, this whole experience isn't your first go-around? The core idea here is that our true identity, what this source calls the soul, is on a journey that doesn't just end with one lifetime. It suggests that our essence, the real you, keeps going, moving from one physical body to another through time. Okay, to really wrap our heads around this, we've got to start with the basics. We need a clear definition. So let's ask the most fundamental question. According to this point of view, what exactly is the soul? And there you have it. The soul isn't some fuzzy, vague life force. It's defined as the conscious self, the part of you that's thinking and feeling right now. And that self is said to move or transmigrate from one body to the next when a life ends. This definition right here is the bedrock for everything else we're going to look at. That is a massive claim, right? I mean, it changes everything. So the next logical question has to be, does the source offer any kind of evidence or arguments to support this wild idea of a soul that travels between bodies? Let's see what it presents. The first piece of evidence it brings up centers on something a lot of us experience, phobias. The source points to the work of a psychiatrist named Dr. Ian Stevenson. He actually spent decades researching kids who claimed to remember past lives, and he had a pretty wild theory that some of our deepest, most irrational fears might not have come from this life at all. Think about that for a second. The link he's proposing here is, well, it's fascinating. Stevenson's whole argument is that these really intense, unexplainable phobias are basically traumatic memories. They're echoes of how a past life may have ended. And this lays it out perfectly. So, for example, a person who drowned in a past life might have a crippling, unexplainable fear of water in this one. Or someone who was stabbed could have a phobia of knives. A victim of a shooting, a deep fear of guns. It's a pretty compelling, if a little unsettling idea. All right, the source then builds on this by looking at something that has always fascinated scientists, the mystery of identical twins. So, we all know identical twins share the exact same DNA. They are genetic carbon copies. But as Dr. Stevenson also pointed out, they can have totally different personalities, right? One can be an introvert, the other an extrovert. The argument here is that if genes alone can't explain these huge differences in temperament, then maybe something else is going on. Maybe, it suggests, you have two completely different souls, each with its own history, living in those two identical bodies. Okay, so let's just go with it for a second. If we accept the idea that the soul keeps going and moves between lives, the next obvious question is, how? How does that even work? What are the mechanics of this process, according to the source? This brings us to the how-to guide for reincarnation. And the source argues that the absolute key to the whole thing is our consciousness, especially what's happening in our minds at the very moment of death. To explain how this works, the source points to this verse from the Bhagavad Gita. The idea is that your state of mind, the thoughts, the feelings, the desires you're holding onto as you leave your body acts like a kind of spiritual GPS, guiding your soul to its next destination. So to put it really simply, it all boils down to two things. First, your consciousness,
what you're thinking and wanting at the very end, and second, the total balance of all your actions throughout your life, what most people call karma.
This image really captures the weight of that final moment, doesn't it? According to this view, where you go next isn't random. It's not a lottery. It's the culmination of everything you've thought and done. The thoughts and desires you've practiced your whole life all come to a head and basically decide what happens next.
And that brings us right into our final section, which is all about that second factor, the law of karma. It explores how the things we do in this life can have very direct consequences for the next one.
Okay, now to really explain this idea, the source material lays out something it calls a karmic hierarchy. And it's really important for us to be super clear here. We're just presenting this concept exactly as it appears in the source to explain how karma is described. We're explaining, not endorsing.
So according to this perspective, positive actions, or good karma, can lead to what's seen as a more desirable birth. You might be born rich or educated or beautiful. On the flip side, negative actions create bad karma, which could result in being born poor, illiterate, or ugly. The source even extends this logic to things like nationality and race.
And the karmic scale doesn't stop with humans. The text goes on to say that if a person's actions are considered especially sinful, their soul can actually be reborn outside of the human species altogether. It can glide down and inhabit an animal's body. So how do you deal with all this? Well, the source wraps up by showing two different mindsets. You've got the reactive one, which sees a selfish world and decides, fine, I'll be selfish too. Then there's the proactive mindset, which sees that same world but chooses a different path, a path of kindness, of setting a better example. So what's the big takeaway here? Ultimately, this entire framework is built on a radical sense of personal responsibility. Your destiny isn't just something that randomly happens to you. Your thoughts, your choices, your actions, they are the very tools you're using to build your future, one life at a time. And that really brings this whole thing back to you. Let's forget the theory for a second and make it personal. If you genuinely knew, without a doubt, that you were coming back, that this was just one chapter in a much, much longer story, how would that change the way you live your life today? So, what are we, really? I mean, are we just these physical bodies, or is there something more going on? Today, we're going to dive into that ancient idea of the soul and see what science might just have to say about it. You know, for centuries, so many traditions have suggested we're way more than just flesh and bone. The idea is that there's this core consciousness, a soul, that just keeps going. And this isn't just some abstract philosophical thing. It paints this incredible picture of our existence as this vast, kind of mysterious journey that goes way beyond a single lifetime. So, the big question is this all just blind faith, or can we actually investigate it? Let's take a look at the clues presented in our source material. All right, so our investigation starts with things that are kind of hard to explain with simple biology, and we're going to focus on the research of a Dr. Ian Stevenson. First up, let's talk about phobias. You know, those really intense, almost out-of-nowhere fears that some people are just born with. And Dr. Stevenson's theory, it's pretty wild. He directly connects these built-in fears to traumatic events from a past life. And the correlations he proposes are, well, they're incredibly specific. Someone who supposedly drowned might have a phobia of water today. Someone who was stabbed, a fear of knives. Someone shot, a deep fear of guns. Okay, so moving on from fears, what about our personalities? The case of identical twins gives us another real puzzle if you think we're only our biology. Think about it. They have the exact same genetic blueprint, so they should be super similar, right? But anyone who knows a set of identical twins knows they can have totally different personalities. So the explanation being offered here is kind of like this. Imagine you have two identical computers. Same hardware, right? But you install completely different software on each one. The idea is that two different souls with their own histories are in two genetically identical bodies. Okay, so if we accept this idea for a moment, if a soul does carry over, how does that even work? What's the process for that journey? Well, ancient texts like the Bhagavad Gita actually point to a mechanism, and it all comes down to your state of mind, your consciousness, right at the moment of this. So according to this view, your next life isn't just some random roll of the dice. Nope. It's supposedly determined by three key things: your final thoughts, all your unfulfilled desires, and the grand total of all your actions, your karma. And this brings us to that huge universal concept that's said to govern this whole process: karma. Basically, cause and effect, but stretched across lifetimes. The principle is laid out as this sort of cosmic justice system. Your actions have real consequences for where your soul goes next. The idea is that your consciousness can actually evolve or devolve based on how you live. Okay, but how does this really play out in our day-to-day human lives? The examples given suggest it's all about cosmic balance, a way of learning across many, many lives. The source uses these specific pairings to illustrate the idea. The concept here is that karma essentially forces a soul to experience life from a totally different, sometimes opposite, perspective. The goal in this framework is to build empathy, to literally walk a mile in someone else's shoes, you could say. So, after all this cosmic, mind-bending stuff, what does it all mean for you and me, right here, right now? Well, it all boils down to a single, personal choice we're making all the time. In basically any situation, we face this fundamental choice. Are we just going to react to what's happening to us, or are we going to consciously decide how to act within it? You know, one path is just to mirror whatever negativity we see. People are selfish, so we get selfish. We feel attacked, so we attack back. That's the path of reaction. But there's another path, the path of proactive choice. This is about deciding, consciously deciding, to be tolerant, to be patient, to set a good example no matter what's going on around you. And this choice, it's not just about having a better day. In this framework, it's the very engine that drives your soul's journey. It's what shapes your karma and determines the entire path of your consciousness. And that brings this whole massive investigation right back to you, in this moment. Because from this perspective, the greatest journey the soul can take, well, it all starts with the smallest choice you make today.